Welcome to the Tax Awareness Show. My name is Shilebo Mutiba. I'm your host. And today on the Government Pulse, we are sitting with the Councillor Mpumi Edward from Action SA. We're going to unpack the issues that have just recently came out, the developments around City of Johannesburg and the finances. If you recall, the Minister of Finance wrote a letter, very strong-worded letter, to the Mayor of City of Johannesburg. And Councillor, welcome and thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
No, we are happy to have you. Maybe a simple question. Is the City of Johannesburg collapsing?
It sounds simple, but it's quite difficult because, you know, when a city collapses, it's an indication of something deeper. It does not happen immediately. It means that a lot of events have occurred before then. Now, as a city, we work within the confines of periods, financial periods. So the period in question, it's a period that is 2 financial periods away. So it's 2023, 2024. And all indications, if we look at that period, that financial period, it seems as if in that period also, I think combined with the letter that was received from the Finance Minister, the city is actually on the brink of collapse because we've gone past a financial year, which is 2024, 2025, and the formal audited financial statements have not been released for that period. But I can tell you, seated here, as a chairperson of the Section 79 Finance Committee, whose task with overseeing the implementation of the budget and the usage of finances within the city, that the city is indeed in trouble. I just want to break it down for you for that specific financial year that the minister wrote about. In that financial year, the city generated 84 billion revenue, and the expenditure was at 87 billion, which means it ran into a deficit of 3 billion. Now, let's look at how revenue first is generated. We all know that most municipalities in local government cannot generate adequate revenue on their own. So there's a reliance on grants from the province and national departments. And these grants are mainly utilized for CAPEX projects to develop projects within municipalities. Another form of revenue, which is the one that as Action SA were mostly opposed to, especially when there's tariff increases, it's revenue that we generate as a municipality from water, electricity, and charges and service charges. So we've been very vocal as Action SA with regards to surcharges that are put as a burden on residents. And we've seen an increase in this current financial year on those surcharges to 270. But also in terms of generating revenue, we've been adamant as Action SA to say, let's explore other areas of revenue generation instead of being too much reliant on only what we get from the residents through payment of tariffs. And if we look at revenue, I mean, we've got assets within the city that we could be utilizing. We've got rentals that we could be collecting as the city, you know, from the buildings that we owe. But we've seen a decay over the years, you know, in terms of that infrastructure, in terms of those assets. So we can't generate any tangible income. But there's other avenues, like, for example, looking at outdoor advertising, which is something that the city hasn't tapped into. If you drive around the city of Johannesburg, you'll see that there's a lot of illegal advertising around the city. And that is the potential revenue from the city. Also, we've seen strategies to collect revenue that really are not intensified, that could be improved so that they can collect. At the moment, we are collecting at about 87% of what we are billing. But beside that, I just want to again talk about expenditure. I've summarized that. Let's look at expenditure. Where is the city spending most of its money? So we've got this big wage bill in the city. The city employs more than 30,000 people at the moment. And a quarter of our expenditure of our revenue that we collect is paid to employees as wages. And we also see a lot of money spent on contracted services. And these contracted services are services such as the usage of cleaners, securities, and all that. And we as Action SA, we've been adamant that there are potential ways if we insource these services, because these are not ad hoc services. These are services that we need on a daily basis in terms of having cleaners and securities. So that's one of our biggest expenditure, contracted services. And another big expenditure is our bulk buying. Because as a city, we buy in bulk water and electricity. And as I'm speaking to you in the previous financial year, we're still sitting with an exorbitant debt of about 6 billion to Eskom, which obviously incurs interest. As long as it's still there, it will still incur interest. So I think, if you look at all these expenditures, and also we then explore other expenditures that could have been avoided. For example, I just want to tell you something very interesting. As a city, during that financial year, which is 2023-2024, we lost 5 billion electricity to a value of 5 billion. We lost electricity to a value of 5 billion. Now, the question is, these electricity losses, is it something that we could have avoided? And the answer is yes. Because out of that 5 billion, 4 billion of it was due to electricity theft, electricity losses. So it's something that we could have avoided,
Maybe let me come in there. And you're speaking about all these fruitless and wasteful expenditures that you're mentioning. And it's exactly that. Maybe let's go back to this letter by National Treasury. They're raising this. They're raising this, they even termed it to being called UIFWE. And for that, the person who doesn't understand it, what is this letter about to the City of Johannesburg? So maybe let's unpack that, the issues that have been raised there. The minister is even mentioning that there's been little to no action being done to dealing with unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the city. What's going on? Why were there no action, or for that matter, to the sectors to satisfy, for that matter, where that National Treasury is satisfied?
Okay, I think the starting point is to define these big words so that our viewers can understand them.
Correct.
These are all wasteful expenditures. It's just that they are termed differently. Unauthorized. Let's talk about unauthorized expenditure first. Unauthorized expenditure would occur when expenditure is done and it's not budgeted for. So it talks directly to budgeting processes. Now, what I want to share with you is that you asked a very important question about reoccurrence of what has occurred now and what has been identified by the Finance Minister and obviously by the Auditor General. So what we're seeing a pattern. There is a pattern that is reoccurring of this unauthorized expenditure. And the causes of that pattern is when the city is budgeting through the budgeting process and there's an absence of oversight in that process. it's one of the reasons why we're here, because what will then happen is if the committee, the finance committee, because I always say that all these things, they don't start with the municipal account committee, which is the MPAC committee. Mm-hmm. They start with finance. MPAC deals with the after effects of what has gone wrong. So if the finance committee within the City of Johannesburg is allowed, according to how it's mandated, to oversight the actual budgeting process, then we're going to be able to reduce these unauthorized expenditures, because then we'll be able to assist them with expertise in terms of playing that oversight and assist the budgeting department to be able to identify the right amounts, to be able to identify the right processes as well, because in most instances, these unauthorized expenditures, sometimes they are linked to the IDP. Sometimes they are linked to that IDP where the municipality has gone to various communities to identify their needs. And now there's a community that is, there's an unrest in a community, and whatever that need is had been voiced out by the community during the IDP process, and now it needs to be implemented. What do? You deviate. You deviate.
Maybe let me unpack something. You just raised that if the committee was to be allowed to do what is mandated to do, are you telling me that there's a frustration in the finance committee in executing its own mandate currently?
There's been quite a lot of attempts to stop the committee from not only conducting oversight, but conducting effective oversight according to its terms of reference. I mean, the finance committee specifically, according to its terms of reference. And that frustration comes when important information is not vanished in terms of reports. It comes when the committee is excluded from important budgeting processes. I'll give an example. We just came out now from a budgeting process for this financial year, and all stakeholders were involved in that process, except for the finance committee that is tasked with actually oversighting the implementation of the budget. And we also had instances where certain reports that could have prevented this whole situation that we're sitting with now with the finance minister. For example, the reports on supply chain deviations that we should, as a committee, be monitoring on a monthly basis, actually, so that we detect those deviations and identify, and also put recommendations together so that they don't repeat themselves, you know. So we've had some level of frustration when it comes to those reports, including there's financial reports that we call Section 71 as well, which to me, it never made sense that a Section 71 report, because as mandated by the MFMA, the Section 71 report should be submitted to Treasury within 10 days. And then once it comes to Treasury, it goes directly to Council without being tabled to the finance committee, which to me, it was a very big gap, you know. And since I've been in the position of being a chairperson, it's something that I've been advocating, you know, clearly that, and harshly at some point, that it's really preventing the committee itself from conducting oversight, because once a Section 71 report, a supply chain report that talks to deviation, for example, it's brought before the committee, before it goes to council, we can then input and give our input as a committee in terms of recommendations to council, and would be able to then see changes in behavior and changes in ensuring that we don't have a repeat of the same financial mismanagements. So that has been a very big problem.
Maybe let me come in here. In that letter from the Minister of Finance, he actually highlighted that the council certified that some of these irregular expenditures are not going to be recovered. Now, are you telling me that is it one of those typical example where, because I was going to ask you this question to say, how did the council certify that? What was the role of the finance committee? Did finance committee recommend this report or this resolution? Because I will expect that type of a report to have been tabled at the finance committee before it goes to the council for council to adopt it. So are you telling me that this is typical example where finance committee maybe didn't have an eye of these in these incidents, and then this report end up being at the council and being approved? But to top that, what powers do you have as a finance committee in cases where reports are not tabled at the finance committee but then end up being tabled at the council for that matter? What powers do you have? What legal powers do you have to make sure that the very same thing that have been adopted by the council are actually null and void?
Okay, I think let's first talk about the powers, then we'll get to the issue of the key players in this particular instance. So as a committee, finance committee, we have our terms and reference that stipulate the nature of our oversight, which include interrogating and scrutinizing quarterly reports, financial reports, annual reports, the Auditor General report, and physical oversights are part of our main mandate. But also, our powers also are very clear that we can summon anyone within the city, any official, any MMC or accounting officer, if there's any other issue that needs further clarity in the committee. So those are the powers that we have. But I just want to clarify something, because this is important, and I always clarify it, when we have these discussions. We need to get to understand that the finance committee is more on a preventative side of accumulating this wasteful expenditure.
Correct.
And we've got the municipal account committee, which is the MPAC committee, and they are more on they dictate these things, they detect these things, but also they need to be dealing with them now in terms of consequence management, investigate and deal with these in terms of consequence management. So as a finance committee, we should and we must be getting all these reports, because if we're given the opportunity to scrutinize and identify the gaps, the financial gaps, then we're able to make sure that all these issues, as they crop in, we deal with them decisively. And at that point, if there's any need for consequence management, we're able to ensure that consequence management takes place at that point. But now, what happens is that in the absence of information, in the absence of all those reports, by the time our intervention comes in as finance, it's too late. The wasteful expenditure, irregular expenditure, is then now seated with MPAC. And when it gets to MPAC, their role is to investigate. They look for information, they investigate, and once they've investigated, they then recommend to council if the wasteful expenditure should be written off, or if it should be referred for further investigation. So where the gap also is that between the occurrence of the event, of the irregular expenditure, and the consequence management, which lacks also, the gap is too wide. So a wasteful expenditure in this instance, for example, that has been identified by the Finance Minister, these are not the only wasteful expenditures we have in the city. Even the financial year prior to 2003, 2004, we've got financial wasteful expenditures that have not been dealt with. For example, in our last council sitting, we had some cases that were referred to council for council to authorize for further investigation into those cases. But I can tell you now, 50% or even 90% of those cases were older than the financial year at hand that we're talking about. They were actually referring back to the previous term. So what it means is that we haven't even dealt with this. So we've got your committees, these two committees that are the key players. You've got your council also, who's your key player here. But before then, we've got internal audit. Who is supposed to be the key player here? Because internal audit should be able to identify the risks that are there through conducting effective audits during the course of the year before even the Auditor General comes to the municipality. So there are gaps when it comes to internal audit. But I think the most important thing that might have provoked the whole thing, it's how we have performed also in the previous financial year, 2024-2025. Because remember, we report to National Treasury on a monthly basis. So the minister has got sight of that performance. And really, if the action plans that were submitted for the 2023-2024 were effective and were being implemented, then there should have been progressive improvements. But I can tell you now, if we sit again here a few months down the line when we have financial reports for this previous financial year, we'll still talk about accumulated mismanagement in the system. Because even if we look at the 24 billion of wasteful expenditure, it has increased from the previous financial year, which was 2022-2023. There's an increase on it as well. So these are the forms of mismanagement that actually prompted, I think, the Finance Minister, because it's a clear indication that the recommendations of the Auditor General themselves, beside the action plan that was submitted, have not been implemented. It means that the internal controls within the city are still very weak. And it means also the monitoring mechanisms in the city are not in place, because what we've just discussed now in terms of the committee having those monthly reports is part of those monitoring mechanisms during the course of the financial year.
Maybe you are actually touching on a lot of things that the minister raised. Weak control environment. It's City of Johannesburg is listed as one of those municipalities with very, very weak control environment, and maybe speaks to exactly that, where organs or the structures that's supposed to be enhancing the control environment actually seems not to be working hand in hand. As we say, there are certain reports that bypass the finance committee, but they're sitting at MPAC, and MPAC then submit to, or maybe there isn't much of consequence management, because also the minister is actually raising that very same issue of lack of consequence management on those officials that may have trespassed. But let me ask this, for someone who may not be aware, what happens? Because right now the mayor of City of Johannesburg is expected to respond to National Treasury within 14 days, if I'm not mistaken. And I expect that in that response, they need to be some form of a plan on how he, as the accounting officer of the City of Johannesburg, is going to go about improving and addressing these UIFWE, WE as termed currently. Maybe let me take it this way. My question to you is, what is the worst thing that can happen? What happens if National Treasury comes and say, I see your implementation plan, I see your turnaround plan, I'm actually not satisfied? What powers does the National Treasury have over these processes?
I think, as I've explained to you, what we're seeing here is not just a symptom of something, but it's a symptom of events that have happened over a period. The interventions of National Treasury are always at the disposal of municipalities, including Kwakta. And when a minister pens down such a letter, in my view, it means that he has reached breaking point. It means that it's not National Treasury now writing to the municipalities. This is the minister himself it means that the situation is dire. That's what it means, that the situation is dire and this has reached breaking point. And I think all indications of even the previous financial year, how we've performed, are indicating that this is an urgent, dire situation, what we're faced with. Now, we are asking about the powers of the National Treasury. If we look at Section 139 and Section 216 of the Constitution, National Treasury, provincial government and national government have got powers to. National Treasury can withhold the grants to the municipality, which could be dire for the residents of Johannesburg. It's a dire situation. Provincial and national government could place the city under administration. We've seen this happening with other municipalities. A municipality at hand here in Gauteng is Mfuleni, where there was total collapse in terms of service delivery. And also their wasteful expenditure had reached the highest levels. That was an indication that controls were not in place, governance systems were not in place, and it's an indication of poor leadership, basically. And there's Mangaung as well in the Free State that was once in the same situation. So I think the question is, if this was to happen here in Johannesburg, what will it mean to our residents? We are sitting now, I just want to share a few things with you. We are sitting with a municipality that hardly spends the entire grants that are received from province or national for infrastructure projects. For example, at this period that we're looking at, only 72% of grants was utilized. So already we're sitting in a space where we risk not getting grants, having some grants withdrawn or decreased to the city. So there is a lot at stake here for ordinary residents, because what it means is that if grants are not forthcoming, it means that the city will not have enough to run its business in terms of operations, operational budget, and even CAPEX budget. But I just want to highlight something, because it's interesting that you're asking me this question in terms of the thoughts of the minister. Within the City of Johannesburg, you actually don't need to go into the financials. Once you step into the city, your physical movement within the city, it's a good enough indication that there's some level of chaos in the city. You drive on roads full of potholes. You walk around, you see buildings that are dilapidated. You see traffic lights that are out of order. You see a decay in infrastructure, stolen infrastructure, and all that type of decay physically now, without even scrutinizing the finances of the city. You can see that there's a bigger problem here. There's a decay in infrastructure. Now, at the center of all this decay, it means that there's a lack of effective leadership within the city, because oversights cannot be conducted if the leadership is not effective. Although we understand the separation of powers exists in terms of the legislature, a body, and the executive, but the decay is out there. The decay is clear for the minister to even pen down this letter. And also, it is clear that the City of Johannesburg is a city without any plans, because that particular report, the annual report, the Auditor General report came out months back. By now, if there was a concrete plan from the mayor, from the executive, to deal with the decay in the city. As Action SA, we've said it long time ago when Mr. Mashaba was still a mayor in the city of Johannesburg. He started the Inner City Rejuvenation Project, where the aim was to make sure that the buildings that have decayed in the inner city are repaired, they are rebuilt, and they're given to the private sector so that they can finance them, so that we can attract more investment into the city. So that particular project itself hasn't moved since 2019. When he left, the project was still at phase 1. We've never seen the day of phase 2 and phase 3 of that project. And beside that, we have done oversights on CAPEX projects within the city. Remember, a tangible amount of the city's budget goes towards CAPEX projects. Now, it's quite shocking because some of the projects where money was spent are still incomplete up to today. I mean, a project at hand is the Lillian Goyi Street in the inner city in Johannesburg, where money has been spent, money has been paid out, but the project is still not completed.
Maybe let me come in exactly on that particular project.
Yes.
What's happening? Because I mean, as a finance committee, like you said, we're empowered to someone. What work have you guys done to understand? Because as residents, we feel that something's not right there. There could be potential wastage that may happen. We don't know. We don't have that insight. What is it that work have you done as the committee to ensure that you hold those people that are responsible for that particular project accountable? For the sake of fiscal discipline, for that matter.
So let's start defining that problem, because the problem contributes to the topic we're talking about today of wasteful expenditure. So that's irregular expenditure that has taken place there. So a certain amount was budgeted for that project. There were contract issues that came out, and those contract issues were due to supply chain processes not being followed correctly, whereby a service provider that was identified did not meet the requirements that are required for one to be a service provider. You know, there were issues that were raised. We've all seen that on the media in terms of the tax clearance certificates. There were issues of the owner of the company being investigated elsewhere, some fear of government. So you can see clearly there that if we look at the supply chain processes and the tender processes, they were not followed correctly. And as a result, another contractor had to be appointed to complete the work. Now, immediately when you appoint another contractor, when you've budgeted for the work, it means you're going to incur expenses, expenditure, and it's wasteful expenditure, because now it means that you must pay interest to that contractor. It means you must halt the project actually. And if we think of that specific project at Lillian Goyi, there's businesses around there that have not been operational now for more than a year because of what happened there. So the implications are not negative towards ordinary residents, who are also affecting other stakeholders such as businesses who cannot trade, who cannot do business now because the area is enclosed. So to simplify this thing, you know, when contracts are not managed properly, so there's an issue around controls, around contract management, because one would then ask a question, when a project is incomplete, how does a service provider get paid? Who is responsible to oversight the entire project to make sure that they sign it off, you know, in terms of completion? And all those things are the internal controls, if we break them down, that the minister is talking about. Because I can give you numerous examples of CAPEX projects where the city has spent money And those projects have been halted because of disputes in contracts. And we incur interest and we pay out money on a monthly basis on those contracts. And some of the projects, we've got projects that have been completed, but they're not being utilized. Then one will ask and say, how do we then measure the return on investment on what we invest on? We've got a project, for example, within the city, which is called the GT project. This project was meant for long distance buses, and it was meant there to ensure that we bring all the relevant stakeholders such as SARS, customs, and all that for long distance buses that go to SADC countries outside the country. That project was, billions were spent on that project, and that project is still lying there. It's not generating, it's not being utilized, that whole project, and it's not generating any revenue for the city. So in simple terms, when we allocate money to projects and projects do not get monitored correctly and there are no internal processes to monitor those projects, we see collapse. But it all starts with allocating tenders. So that process of awarding tenders is a very critical process, and it's something that, as the finance committee within the City of Johannesburg now, was starting to scrutinize even further. We're trying to find ways, because we know that the legislation doesn't allow us to sit in bid committees, but we're trying to find ways to monitor the actual awarding process of a tender, because in most instances it becomes too late, like the Lillian Goy. It becomes too late when money has been paid out to a contractor, or a contractor has been appointed for that matter. You can't intervene at that point. Until then, you hear that something has gone wrong, then money is paid out. And that's what accounts then to a wasteful expenditure. It's part of wasteful expenditure.
But maybe within that, you earlier on, you mentioned that your committee is empowered to summon the officials for that matter. Maybe speaking, and I'll link these powers to what the minister is also raising in the letter, because he's saying that officials were not held accountable, right? Now, you being empowered to actually summon these very same officials, what work are you guys doing as the committee, or intending to do for that matter, to make sure that these officials that contributed to this wasteful expenditure are held accountable?
There's various ways. I'll talk now as Action SA.
Correct.
As a party. There's various ways to hold the executive accountable, because you must first hold the accounting officer accountable before you even go to the officials. So there's various ways. If you can recall, when the adjustment budget was tabled earlier this year, as Action SA, we did not support it. And we had numerous reasons why we didn't support it. We didn't think that the budget was fair, was sound. And one of the reasons, I'll just list about three. We had numerous reasons why we didn't support that budget. The first reason that we didn't support the budget, it was because of the surcharge. We as Action SA, when we came into government with the ANC, we had agreed that we are going to reverse the implementation of the surcharge, which that agreement was in place. But came the adjustment budget, the agreement changed. And really the reason for that is that we feel that our residents are burdened. They are burdened. Remember I spoke to you briefly about the electricity loss. We also have water losses. We've got about 4 billion in that period. We had about 4 billion water losses. And some of them are due to water theft. Some are due to infrastructure decay.
Correct.
So the inefficiencies in the government by the executive are then passed to residents who are willing to pay. Because even illegal connections and all those are the inefficiencies of the executive, because they need to find way to ensure that they collect whatever that they need to collect, and take to task those that are stealing electricity or water. But that is not happening. So the burden is then passed on to the residents by increasing tariffs, by putting in place unreasonable surcharges like the current surcharge that is in place. And secondly, we felt that the executive was not utilizing all the available strategies to collect revenue adequately. Because you can't have a target of 87% collection rate and you say, no, I'm willing to collect. So we had identified opportunities in terms of collections. And one of those opportunities is to reach out to businesses, for example, that are owing the city, to reach out to the very same government departments that are owing the city and recoup the money from those departments instead of increasing putting in place in the first place the surcharge and increasing it later on, and even increasing tariffs. So that was the second reason. The third reason, we felt that the executive or the municipality wasn't monitoring projects that were being implemented adequately. So there was a lot of wastage. There's a lot of wastage in terms of projects that are not being completed. So that's why now when we have, for example, the integrated development planning sessions, which are IDPs, you'd hear communities saying that, but we've raised this 3 years ago. But we can see that you've started building the clinic, but it's been in progress for the past 3 years. What is happening? So we've seen those type of things happening. And we're saying that the municipality has got an opportunity to put in place the right expertise, to put in place the right leadership, to be able to monitor and put framework and put all the internal controls in place to be able to manage those projects adequately. Because once we start doing that, it means then we stop these unrests that we're seeing now and then, more frequently, even so, from ordinary residents. Secondly, it means that it then improves our budgeting process, because at any given financial year, we need to go back to projects that were done in previous financial years. It's either we're completing them, but in most instances, they're even vandalized by the time we go back to them. So all those issues, including more issues, really prompted us as Action SA to say, no, we're not going to support this adjustment budget, because it's not a budget that, it's not a proper budget that support poor communities and communities that are in need. And even the middle class is not being supported, because if we look at the surcharge, we've got about 80,000 customers that are paying this surcharge, and most of them are the middle class. But also, yes, they're the middle class, So all those things combined, we then said, no, we're not going to support it. We then came to the budget for this current financial year, and we also did not support that budget. We were clear that all the issues that we've raised previously, if they're not being addressed, we're not going to support the budget. And really, we didn't support the budget because we didn't believe that the budgeting process was done in a fair and a fair manner. And also, if we look at the process, for example, of how we budget as a city, we don't use the zero-based process, there's always accumulative budgets. And I think we're at a point where we are saying that, these entities under the municipality, they must start producing and showing that they're actually contributing to revenue collection, firstly. And secondly, they should be in a position now where they're saying, this is how we're also saving money within the city, And thirdly, they should be in a position where they say, this is how we dealt with gaps in corruption and fraud to prevent excessive expenditure. And lastly, they should be saying that this is how we have performed. In this financial year that the minister is talking about, the performance was only at 57% for the entire city. So we want those entities to contribute. I mean, if we look at City Power, for example, and Joburg Water, those are the two entities that, City Power and Joburg Water are the two entities that have got the highest expenditure. So we don't want entities just to come to collect money at the beginning of the financial year, but they must show the residents what they've done with that money and what they did to ensure that they've tried to minimize expenditure, So those are the things that made us not to support that budget. And you might ask and say, but we are in coalition with the ANC. Maybe it could be your next question. And not really. We've got an arrangement, where we deal with issue to issue basis. As issues come, we deal with those issues, But also, even if we were in coalition with with these other parties that are there, that should not mean that governance should be compromised. It should not mean that we should compromise what is best for the residents of Johannesburg, because when the purse dwindles, it means then we must collect more from our residents. And we're seeing now, we're getting a lot of litigation cases now, which is part of wasteful expenditure as well, where residents now are taking us to court because of the absence of systems. And one particular system, the billing system, that is not effective, it's incorrect. I mean, some of our customers, we bill them incorrectly and we insist that they must pay, and they take us to court. So we go through litigation and we accumulate wasteful expenditure. But I'm glad that this financial year, there will be a new system that's going to be put in place, a new billing system that's going to be put in place. But the question still is, how do we resolve those billing issues that are still in existence, because we've got quite a number of those issues.
Maybe let me take you back to, because I saw in earlier on your party Action SA issued a statement around those entities, Joburg Water and City Power, but over and above that, it was responding to the new changes in the leadership. There's a change in the leadership where there's a new MMC of finance, and I think you'll be working very closely with that MMC as a chairperson of a finance committee. What's your reaction on the new MMC?
In politics, what we've observed is that there's quite a lot of recycling of political leaders into these prominent positions. And that is evident across most municipalities. Hence, in other instances, you see pockets of total collapse in those specific portfolios. For example, you cannot appoint someone who is not financially trained, someone who does not have finance background or even knowledge or experience in that field, because finance is a little bit technical, and appoint such a person. So in most municipalities, what we've seen is that political appointments are just for pals, jobs for pals. And in other instances, they are just there to protect each other, within that space, So we've seen quite a lot of that. So if, for example, we look at the previous MMC, her background was not necessarily finance. So with this current appointment, all I can say is that we'll wait and see, because this particular MMC was heading governance, group governance. And one of the issues here that we're battling with are the issues that relate to consequence management, which partly group legal was part of a portfolio, risk was part of a portfolio, GFIS part of a portfolio. So we are saying here there's departments or directorates that partly have played a role to this letter being drafted. Because if all the key players were effective and playing their roles in terms of detecting wasteful expenditure, in terms of ensure there's preventative measures, which part of those preventative measures include consequence management. Now, with consequence management, by now, would have seen quicker responses to investigations, would have seen litigation, would have seen dismissals and more disciplinary actions being taken. But instead, what we have seen is the abuse of Section 32 of the MFMA, where investigations are not thoroughly done on time and they are not concluded. So I'm still responding to you. I'm saying that for now, our reaction is that we'll wait and see. But the role that she held, she had an opportunity to deal with the ills of the city and these issues, this mismanagement of finances that we're discussing now. Not one person has been dismissed, and 24 billion is gone.
24 billion is gone, and in that 24 billion, there were deviations that took place. And in the statement, media statement that was issued by your party, Action SA, the party leader mentioned that they're proposing, or they will be working towards, that deviations must be tabled at the council. To me, that is one action that your party will be taking in dealing with and addressing these issues of UIFWE. Now, what else would you be doing over and above from Action SA point of view, but also you as the chairperson of Finance Committee? What will you be doing to deal with this issue? Because this issue, like you said, it's a dire situation.
So let me talk about the committee first. I'll come back to Action SA because there's more that Action SA is doing. So the first thing, as a chairperson of the Finance Committee, I evoked, there's a section that 25 in the standing rules and orders of council that I evoked, which means that if there's any matter that arises outside a committee sitting that propels me and the committee to respond to, because it's part of our mandate, it's in favor of the committee, I can do so without immediate consultation or even convening a meeting with the committee. So when we first saw the letter, when it first came out, I then wrote a letter to the mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Tata Morero, as a chairperson of the committee. That was the first step. And we have not received any response as yet to that letter. And we're hoping that we will get the mayor to respond. We're glad now that the appointment of the MMC has been finalized. But before then, there was no MMC of finance. So the mayor the letter was directed to the mayor. And really the questions that were being posed there were the very same questions that are posed by the finance minister. we wanted to know why is it that the recommendations of the Auditor General have not been implemented? Why are the internal controls not being strengthened? And why are we still seeing the same results? What is the leadership doing? So it was more around accountability. We want the mayor to account because he's the accounting officer for the municipality. But furthermore to this, we then in that same letter outlined the role that we have played during the course of those wasteful expenditures being generated. We outlined our discussion that I've discussed now with you in terms of access to information, how we've been struggling to get the necessary information to ensure that oversight takes place continuously and we scrutinize the financials of the city. So we outlined that. We even outlined the physical oversights that we've done and their impact as well. And remember the audit findings. They come to us as well as a committee. And we then provide recommendations that are also sent to council and ratified in council for implementation. So we've done that, So now the next step, once we, even before we get the response from the mayor, we're then going to write to National Treasury. We're going to write to National Treasury as a committee, and we're going to write to COCTA as well as a committee. And the reason I think that is important is because if we scrutinize the letter from the Finance Minister, really that letter talks about the lack of oversight as well, of effective oversight in the city. Because when the controls are not in place, it's our duty as an oversight body to ensure that we recommend appropriate controls to be put in place. So I don't think that letter is only slamming the mayor and demanding answers from the mayor only, but it's also demanding answers from the legislative body of the municipality to say, where were you when all these things happened? And what have you done when these things took place? So really our letter to the mayor is to demonstrate our role, our proactive role throughout that entire process. And that's what we've done. Mm-hmm. And we'll do the same to COCTA and National Treasury to say, we've played our part. We've done what was necessary to be done in this particular instance.
Did the mayor consult with you in this preparation? Because I can assume that during this period, the mayor is busy preparing the response to National Treasury. Has the mayor spoken to you, or is the mayor required by the law to speak to you, or will you be reaching out to sit down with the mayor in preparation to respond to National Treasury?
I think this aspect of actually writing to the mayor, it's our proactive way to reach out to the mayor, to say, Mayor, we are aware of this letter. We are also aware of the concerns that are being raised here, which none of them are new to all of us. These are old concerns. They were raised by the AG. We identified them in our audited financial statements and in our annual report. We even gave in recommendations. So we're reaching out to the mayor, and we're hoping that the mayor will reach back to us and say, these issues that you are raising here, this is what we've done. But we haven't seen anything tangible in terms of monitoring all these internal controls. We haven't seen them in this past financial year. And what we're likely to see, I just want to reiterate this, is that the financial year 2024-2025 financial year, we're likely to see repeat findings that relate to the same issues that are being raised by the finance minister. Because throughout the last financial year, we've been struggling to improve. For example, if we look at repeat findings, we've been struggling to get the executive to improve on those areas, So we're more likely that if internal controls are still not in place and they are not being monitored, we will probably get the same results again.
The same results. What did you write in that letter to the mayor? What did you tell him?
In that letter, firstly, we highlighted that we've seen, because it was not sent to us, it was sent to him. We've just seen in the public domain a letter which is of concern to us as an oversight committee. And we then went to the issues that are stipulated in that letter. And on each issue, we then raised questions to the mayor, and we said to him, we want to know, why are the internal controls not in place? We want to know the role of internal audit. Why are they not effective? Because we believe that all these things, if internal audit is effective, we should be able to detect them, resolve them before even AG comes, before we even prepare our financial statements. They must be gone, So we stated all these things, we noted all those things, but above all, we then told the mayor what we have been doing as a committee, because I think that is important, and it should come out clearly. We told him about our challenges, number one, that we've been facing, even though it's not the same period, but we anticipate we might get the same results if we don't raise those issues. Then secondly, we then said to him, we've been experiencing this, but we have done oversight according to what we are mandated to do oversight on, although there were restrictions and issues that prevented us to be even more effective. And in a nutshell, that's what we told them, and we hope that is going to respond, because we believe that as Action SA, that oversight committees are there to support the work of the executive, and we should be given an appropriate space, to exercise the mandate of the committee. And sometimes we feel those restrictions are there. Hence, we're saying as Action SA, one of the things that we'd want to see is for these committee sittings to be live streamed. Now, I want to tell you a joke, because you're going to laugh. So, I don't know if it's a joke, but it's serious. So, when I became the chairperson of the Finance Committee, because there's nothing in terms of legislature that says you can't live stream your committee. I then requested for those services in one of my committee sittings. That was last year. And I was blocked during a sitting. So unfortunately, there were interruptions in terms of the live streaming. And there was a directive, apparently, that came from the executive to say that you must stop that streaming, that live streaming. So those are the kind of distractions and restrictions that the executive puts in place to prevent the effectiveness of oversight committees. Because, for example, if I analyze that incident says, no, our residents do not need to know about the internal processes, about how their money is being used, and how really their money is being used. So it's like a secret corner. And if we look at other spheres of government, I mean, you look at the parliament, we all have access to their committee sittings. We watch them all the time. So we need to get to a space where we take local government seriously. Local government is one of the most important spheres of government, because it deals directly with the servicing communities, and bulk of the money that we use in local government is derived from the very same communities. So we should be in a position to be transparent when we govern. We should be able to hold them, for residents to be able to hold us accountable. They must have information. When they don't have information, what happens then? You see a lot of unrest, because people don't understand. They don't have information. So it's crucial that we get to a point where we publish all these wasteful expenditures. They must be in the public domain, and they must be simplified, so that even a layman on the street understand what has happened or what is happening with their finances. So we should be able to be transparent, to publish all the tenders and the names of those companies on our website so that it's accessible, as we do with our financial statements, which are lengthy. And I don't think most residents, unfortunately, I don't think some of them have got the capacity and the time to go through 400 pages and read these financial statements. So that live streaming of the committee sitting, to me, it was one of the most critical points of activating public participation within committees, because then 6 million residents of Johannesburg have got access to what we are discussing about their finances. And if you are live streaming, they can even contribute, give you ideas, give you problems. So it's a more of an interactive form of governance where you really interact truthfully. Unlike when you do IDPs that are prescribed in the legislation, where you are just going there for a tick box. You just want to make sure you've done the process, you've done that. Live streaming, it's what we're still going to advocate for as Action SA. And also consequence management, where we see people that are found wanting, regardless if those people are politicians or they are senior officials or junior officials, but because they've breached the Municipal Finance Act, they must go to jail. They must be dismissed. They must go to jail, because where the gap is in terms of these wasteful expenditures, it's when we're told that a matter has been taken for investigation and 10 years would lapse. The person will leave the employment of the city. The person found wanting will leave the employment of the city, or the person might be deceased by the time a decision is made. And what it means is that the city cannot recover those finances. Hence, you are seeing now money that is being written off. It's because of some of those instances where the money cannot be recovered. But that problem is caused by internal controls, because when something is committed that is against the law, the city should be able to address it within reasonable time, instead of prolonging it over 10 years or 15 years or even more.
Even more. Okay, maybe in closing, how would you be tracking the progress that will be made by the municipality around these wasteful expenditures as Action SA, and for that matter, you as the Section 79 Chairperson?
Firstly, we've got our councillors also that are placed in different committees, Section 79 committees, including the Municipal Account Committee, which is the MPAC committee, and they directly deal with these wasteful expenditures, So how we're going to be tracking them is that we're going to be monitoring the monthly reports in terms of reduction, which we have been monitoring, by the way, closely, to see if they are decreasing on a monthly basis. And if they're increasing, then we'll be able to look at other avenues. For example, we can even submit a motion against these wasteful expenditures to try and decrease them, But like I said, we are just dealing with the symptom at MPAC. MPAC is the symptom of something that has happened. We need to be more proactive at finance, within the finance committee, to even prevent this from happening. Because remember, MPAC deals with already a problem that has been caused. They can't prevent the problem. What happens is that these wasteful expenditures are tabled to them. Then they need to request for additional documentation. Then they will conduct their investigation and take a decision if they're going to proceed with this, or they recommend council to write these off. So that's where it ends with them. But the finance committee has got the ability
to prevent.
And we need to be proactive in preventing that. I think where we are now, it's a step forward of preventing this wasteful expenditure. We're starting now as a committee to receive reports from the executives that we've been waiting for a very long time, which are Section 71 reports, supply chain reports. So we are going to be aggressively scrutinizing those reports.
So aggressively scrutinizing the reports and making sure that reports don't bypass your committee to ensure that you exercise your oversight role as the chairperson of Section 79 Finance Committee. That was Councillor Mpumi. Let me thank you so much for honoring us and our invitation to really unpacking this issue of UIFWE. They call it unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. It's quite a thorn in the city of Johannesburg. For that matter, nationally, it's quite a thorn, and it needs to be dealt with. And I like the fact that you're acknowledging the fact that the Finance Committee can actually prevent these issues. And I wish you luck. It's a tough job dealing with these issues, and I hope that you are going to advocate that there's a transparency, there's a public, insight where we can actually see the working of these committees. Because I believe that when these committees are streamed and they're made accessible to the public, we can actually rally and support the work of these committees by actually pinpointing things that we see that certain committee members, or even for that matter, officials that are coming to account in those committees are not prepared. I mean, we've seen at the national level how other people end up being held accountable because of public pressure. So I think you need to advocate that accessibility of this working of this, particularly finance committee. We need to know, we need to understand where our money is going. We need to see inside those reports what is written, where are the gaps, and we as the public living these things will know if these reports are actually genuine or are they really not that genuine, and we can actually push back and request or seek accountability from these officials to really capacitate the work of the Finance Committee. But let me thank you so much for honoring us, and we look forward to having more and more deliberation, because like you said, I don't think this issue will actually go away anytime soon. We're looking forward to hear what the mayor is going to be saying to National Treasury, a response from the National Treasury. We'll be monitoring these issues very closely and really unpacking it for our viewers and making sure that the people and the residents of Johannesburg really understand how severe this thing is and how it's going to impact, rather affect their and have an impact in their day-to-day life. Let me thank you so much, and I wish you good luck on your work as the chairperson of Finance Committee within the City of Johannesburg.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think this conversation has shed light, especially to the viewers. 24 billion in losses, it's a lot. So as public representatives, we need to ensure that information is accessible to those that we serve. And our expectation is that those that we serve must hold us accountable as public representatives. And we are going to continue as Action SA to make sure that the residents of the City of Johannesburg, their financial contribution to the revenue that we collect in the City of Johannesburg is not taken lightly. We're going to make sure that each and every cent that is being contributed, we can account for it as the city. And those that are responsible for mismanaging and misusing the city's finances are brought to book. And we participate fully in that process as well as Action SA of ensuring that there's good governance in our municipality. We do that because we want to build trust. We want our residents to trust us as public servants so that when we come to them during any type of process, be IDP or any other process, there's trust between us as government and the residents of the City of Johannesburg. So with that, I say that we'll continue serving you with the highest levels of transparency and ensuring that we're ethical in everything that we do as public representatives, as Action SA public representatives. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor. That was Councillor Mpumi Edward, who is the chairperson of Section 79 Finance Committee at the City of Johannesburg, really taking us through and simplify and making understand the issues that are developing, or for that matter, relating to the letter from Minister of Finance to the City of Johannesburg Mayor around the issue of unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditures. What's really happening at the City of Johannesburg? That's exactly what the chairperson, Councillor Mpumi, really unpacked those issues. I hope you understand, and I hope you're going to be, as the residents of City of Johannesburg, you're going to really be monitoring these developments and also holding these public representatives accountable. They need to account to you as residents of City of Johannesburg. But we are also looking forward to the response of the mayor to the National Treasury. We hope that the mayor, if you're watching, come and have a conversation with us. What's really happening at the City of Johannesburg? We want to hear from you, particularly also the new MMC of Finance. Come and have a conversation with us. What will you be doing to ensure that you improve the control environment? As the Minister of Finance has mentioned, that there's really weak control environment within the City of Johannesburg. But from me, my name is Shilpa Mutiba. I'm your host of the Tax Awareness Show. Today, we're reflecting on the Government Pulse segment. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.